Hello, my name is Jos Hackforth Jones. I'm an art historian, lecturer, writer and researcher, and I'm both English and Australian, and I'm delighted to be back based in Sydney after many years of living and working in London, and I'm currently teaching at the University of Sydney. I majored in art history and archaeology at Sydney University, and it was here that I developed my interest and engagement with Australian painting. Early in my career, as part of this passion, my first book was called The Convict Artists, which addressed this subject via the lens of many of our earlier painters who were often convicted of forgery and came to the colony of New South Wales and Van Diemen's Land because of this. Also, one of my early research interests and a publication was the artist Augustus Earle, the first freelance artist to tour the world. Earle continues to engross me. Here he is in 1824, cast away on the island of Tristan da Cunha, the most remote island in the world, with only his sketchbook, gun, and his dog Jenny for company. Fortunately for us, he kept a journal, and the next ship was bound for Van Diemen's Land, so he ended up here in Australia, and this is an archetypal romantic painting held in the National Library of Australia. When I moved to London in the 80s, I was drawn to research the background to colonial Australian painting. So I was particularly interested in the European and British context, and this was very much the subject of my PhD. So, for instance, when one looks at Richard Wilson's Dolbaden Castle, held in the National Gallery of Victoria, I was keen to find out why it looked like this when the landscape of Dolbaden Castle, in front of you now, a photograph that I took, is stark and dramatic and remote and sometimes bleak. And what does Wilson do? He smooths it down. He makes it a classical idyll, which Wales was not in the 18th century. He does this by appealing to classical conventions enshrined in the paintings of, amongst others, Claude Lorraine. And this is Claude's small painting of Hagar and the Angel in the National Gallery, which British artists in the 18th century would have been very familiar with via the collection of Sir George Beaumont. And this is an incredible exemplar, this Claude painting, for many later generations of artists. In the 90s, I moved to work at Richmond, the American International University in London, and focused very much on object-based teaching in major London, as well as the regional galleries and museums. Richmond is extraordinary in having a student body who come from over 100 countries. So this developed my interest in intercultural and cross-cultural issues in art. And this led to an exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery, London, Between Worlds, Voyages to London, 1750 to 1850, where I was the lead curator. And on this slide, you can see a cover of the catalogue at the top, a portrait of Guyon de Noguer, Joseph Brandt, an American Indian who visited London in the 1770s. The portrait on the top right, painted in around 1750 by Gabriel Matthias, is of the African prince Sisaraku, who ended up in London after being sold into slavery while he was on the Grand Tour with a companion. His father, who was himself an African slaver, had sent him off to travel in the accepted European aristocratic mode. On the left, of course, is our own Bennelong, who came to London in 1793 with Captain Philip. And there were lots of descriptions of Bennelong comporting himself as a gentleman, as you can see here. And then, of course, there's Omai, or Mai, the visitor from Raiatea, who came back to London on Cook's second voyage. And here he is painted with Sir Joseph Banks and Daniel Solander. This is one of many paintings made of Omai, who was another celebrity sensation in London. In 2008, I moved to Sotheby's Institute of Art to become the director there. And this further developed my interest in object-based issues and also issues around connoisseurship and authenticity. This culminated in a book on art and authenticity, published in 2014. In addition, I became interested in art business, issues around ethics, the art market, the porous boundaries between the public and the private across the art world. And this too culminated in a book, Art Business Today, in 2017. In late 2019, I moved back to Sydney, and in 2020, I began teaching at the University of Sydney. The Chowchak Wing Museum opened in 2020. This museum is part of the University of Sydney and comprises its famous Nicholson, Macleay, University and Power collections. It's been terrific to be back in the Chowchak Wing Museum with my students engaging in close object-based work. Finally, my favourite exhibition at the Chowchak Wing, which really makes us think about the difference or similarity between an artwork, an object, and a specimen. And this speaks to the heart of this extraordinary museum, the confluence of the different collections and collecting possibilities there. It's brilliant, it's riveting. Do come and see it. Thank you very much.